everyone. I'm Jillian Sidoti. Welcome to the Last Life Ever podcast. This is my friend and co-host, Jeffrey Holst, joining me. And today we are talking about Art Encounter, which is an art gallery in Las Vegas. This is the second part of a two-part episode. Jeff and I had the pleasure of going to Art Encounter, and Brett Maly, the owner of Art Encounter, took us around and showed us how we could buy a Picasso for no money.
Right, and a Moreau and a Dali, and you almost bought a Salvador Dali, if I remember correctly.
Bought a Dali, yeah. I had to kind of like evaluate my priorities, and at the time, that was not one of my priorities.
Yeah, well,
so
I think you made a mistake.
I know, and I really liked that painting, and I still remember it, which shows that I really did like that.
Yeah,
painting.
Well, it might still be available, so you could just make a trip over to Art Encounter and get it. But I'll tell you. A couple of things. One, I was so fanboy of Brett. I mean, I really liked hanging out with him because, I see him on TV because he's the art expert for Pawnstars. And so when he was like, yeah, sure, I'll come on your show. I was like, what? We're going to get to meet Brett. And so I think I sounded like a complete idiot the whole episode because I was just excited to be there.
Yeah, but you know what? That sometimes makes the best interviews because of your enthusiasm. So I loved it. I didn't know what to expect. We were only supposed to be there for about 45 minutes, but in typical Jillian and Jeff style, we stayed for 2.5 hours.
It's true. And they showed us some of the most amazing stuff that we weren't allowed to put on camera because it was not their stuff, but hundreds of millions of dollars worth of art. It was unbelievable.
It was really cool. So anyhow, we want you all to enjoy this episode, this two-part episode, part 2 of Art Encounter.
The bonus episode, as we call it, because the first part came out yesterday. It's going to be on our YouTube channel soon, and you can check it out there as well. But without much ado, what do you say we just go right to the episode, Jillian?
Let's do it.
Oh, it's supposed to be me that does that, huh?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, well, let's just do that right now.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go check out this Leonardo da Vinci. We're going to check out some of the other things in the gallery, too, because there's, Dali's here and your favorite Picasso.
Yeah. So we're here to look at this. What is this?
These are actually castings, bronze castings taken from the only sculptural work known to exist from the hand of Leonardo da Vinci. And these are bronze castings done from a beeswax that Leonardo hand carved in 1508. And it's entitled Horse and Rider. And it depicts a horse, and the rider is a gentleman by the name of Charles d'Amboise, who was the governor of Milan at the time, who was a major patron of Leonardo's. And historians believe that this was a maquette that originally was done in beeswax, but was intended ultimately to be a very large monument, probably a life-size monument to his benefactor. Leonardo had grand visions, and a lot of times his visions were beyond the means at the time. Back then, there was no way of casting a 20-foot sculpture.
Yeah.
So a lot of his visions, unfortunately, due to limitations by the time and just
his helicopter, for example.
Exactly. I mean, he was so far ahead of the game when it came to science, mathematics, art, music, even. He designed the scuba suit long before.
Really?
There was an exhibition here in Las Vegas a few years ago called Da Vinci the Genius, where they actually had his codices, where he would do outlines of his flying machines and his scuba gear and things, and they brought them to life. And he came up with some amazing inventions long before, again, the science was there to actually put them into effect. But yeah, this was a piece that, like I say, was probably about a 5 to 6 year process from the time the gentleman who was the owner of the piece he didn't bring it in physically at the time. He brought in paperwork, about a phone book's worth of provenance and documents and history talking about the piece. He had called up and said, can I come speak to somebody about this Leonardo da Vinci that I have?
Did anybody believe him?
And the best thing I did was not hang up on him. I was like, yeah, okay, you got a Leonardo da Vinci, sure, But I remember telling my father when he came in, I said, this is either going to be like the shortest visit or the longest visit in history. And that was, at this point, about 7 years ago that he first came in. And we've taken it through to where he didn't know what he had where we spoke to experts. We spoke to foundry people at production facilities for sculpture. We talked to equestrian experts about the technique and the what the horse was doing, the different the kind of the coupe technique the horse is doing within the composition. And it took us that long to actually build enough book on this to where we felt it could be announced to the public. And we had a major unveiling for it about 4 or 5 years ago, and exhibited. And
this is something someone can buy.
Now these are castings. Yes, right. These are from the original beeswax, and these are for sale in a very small edition. Both of these are in editions of 99. This is what we call the classic bronze, which is designed to look exactly as the beeswax did back in the day when we carved it. And then this is actually cast in 0.999 sterling silver. Okay. Which we felt Leonardo, should be paid proper homage to, and we felt a precious metal would do.
Did you have? I seem to recall that there were 3 different editions. Is that right?
These are the only 2 editions right now.
Yeah, but there was originally.
Initially we were talking about doing some different editions, but right now the only castings that are available are the classic
less
bronze.
than 299 of each.
Exactly, very very exclusive. And the original was in a vault, so I can't show you that. But this is as close as you can get to a Leonardo without going to the Louvre. Seeing the Mona Lisa, but you can actually.
Well, if you run into one of these in the Michelangelo,
like
we were talking about, you let me know.
There are areas
Jeff, I'm sure he's
piece.
right on. He's going to call you first.
Yeah, first.
Well, absolutely. Well, you're a client. But you can actually see areas on the sculpture where Leonardo's thumbprint is. If you look at the breastplate of the horse, it's a little hard to see through the glass, but if you come around to this
Why don't
side,
you just take the glass off for us and we'll touch it and stuff? No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't. But if you can actually kind of come around to this side, I'll let you come around. What would have happened with this? Yeah. Leonardo would have used his thumbs. You're welcome to take a look at the front breastplate of the horse.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah.
Beeswax is very malleable. It wasn't intended to be the finished product. So as he was doing the mold, he would have used his fingers to manipulate it. And you can clearly see there in the front where he used his thumbs.
When they had the beeswax, we were talking before, you said that this person had the original beeswax?
He had the original mold from the beeswax.
The mold
right,
from
the beeswax, right. That was used to cast the original bronze.
Okay.
The original beeswax is actually in London, England, in a vault.
Who got that? How did that come? How did he get the cast? And then another museum, a museum obviously ended up with it, but who ended up with it ultimately to get it to the museum?
The way he got the cast was it was originally intended to be preserved in, I believe it was 1985 when the cast was made. And he ended up with the mold from which the cast was derived. Originally, they were talking about doing editions back then. They were talking about a museum purchasing it. He was kind of the point person, the money man for the creation of the mold. It kind of fell through, so he ended up with the mold, but nothing had been produced from it.
Oh, wow.
So basically he had, and this is a piece that, if you're familiar with sculpture, typically when a mold is created, it's done in what's called a lost wax, where during the casting process, the beeswax is melted away. Well, obviously, you're not going to do that with the Leonardo da Vinci. You're not going to melt away the beeswax that he touched and carved.
Yeah.
So what was done in 1985 was they did basically a mold, like a latex mold around it with, almost like dental type material that you would use to create like crowns.
Yeah.
So they used that. And that's what he had was the mold that was used that was to kind of preserve the piece in pristine. Well, it wasn't pristine condition because it was 500 years old. There were some air. You can see here the front leg of the horse and the arm of the rider, Charles d'Amboise. There had been some deterioration, but they were able to, in 1985, take the mold to kind of preserve it. And then the bronze was ultimately recast that we helped do once we believed that it was a Leonardo da Vinci.
So you're going to run 99 each of these, and then if somebody were to buy this, what would it run?
Right now, I believe these are 55,000 and these are 65,000.
Okay.
This is more than when I first saw them.
Yeah.
So
what happens is as they've sold, we've kind of got a tiering system. So as they're closer.
Yeah, I mean they were never free. Just
right, of course.
I think they were around 30,000.
Like buy one get one free.
So yeah, they have gone up, and I can't I can't remember. I think every 20 or so that sell, it goes up a certain percentage. But right now, I do believe, and I'll double check, but I do believe these are.
But something in that
Is
range.
there? Should people act now? Are they?
Well, they're going to continue to go up as they. I think right now we're about 2/3 sold out on both. So as we get closer and closer to selling out, the prices will continue.
So get your Da Vinci today, folks.
Well, and again, it goes back to what you're saying. This is as close as you can get to a Leonardo. Without being Bill Gates, where you can buy one of his codices or a sculpture work or a painting. Again, for $55,000 is not inexpensive, but for a Leonardo, a casting directly from the only piece known to exist from his hand, it's a pretty good price.
Well, and you have codices behind us here, right?
We do. Well, these are actually works behind us from the Queen's Collection at Windsor Castle.
Okay.
These were actually cataloged by a gentleman by the name of Carlo Pedretti, he passed away a few years ago, but he was the world's authority on Leonardo da Vinci. And the Queen of England entrusted him to go into her collection, her archives, and catalog all the Leonardo drawings and effects that they have in the collection. A lot of people don't realize, but the largest collection of Leonardo is at Windsor Castle.
Oh, wow.
So all of these drawings are actually in Windsor Castle. And these are, I'll probably pull off one that doesn't have anything on the back, but a lot of these, the way he cataloged these are recto and verso. So what he would do is he would photograph them, and then on the back, of course this one doesn't have one. A lot of times Leonardo would sketch on both sides or doodle or draw, notes or things like that, or inventions.
Wow.
So on some of these, you'll have the sketch on one side, and then you'll have notes about it on the other, or two drawings in one on the front and one on the back. And so these are all the ones that are housed in Windsor Castle. And the gentleman, Carlo Pedretti, who tabulated all of these, he was the original person who saw Horse and Rider, and he was the first major authority to attribute it to Leonardo's hand. So,
wow.
Yeah, and these are from, like I say, these are from the Queen's Collection. He did a portfolio of these, an edition of 500. And these are from one of the portfolios.
This is really, you can basically get something that is Leonardo for $4,000.
Sure.
That's pretty amazing.
He only did, I can't remember exactly how many portfolios he did. I think there were 500. I think Queen of England was given the first one. Carlo Pedretti was number 2. And I think this was one that we actually procured from a rare Italian bookstore. And I think they're number 249, but basically they're limited edition Leonardo da Vinci's because
but produced much after.
Well, of course, these were actually cataloged in I think the mid 80s, and the portfolio was released in the mid 80s. So yes, these were cataloged long after his passing.
Sure, and
these are the only ways that you can actually get the Windsor Castle drawings.
Unless you're the Queen of England.
Unless you're the Queen of England, in which case you can go visit them whenever you want. But yeah, and you can see his love of horses. He was a master artisan. You really can't come up with anything negative to say with regards to his draftsmanship, especially when you think about when he was doing it. This was 550 years ago. There was no photography. He was doing all of his work from either life or, in some situations, death. He would have cadavers. He would do the musculature and the skeletons and things like that.
Oh, his studio must have stunk.
I think so. Yeah.
The Vitruvian Man, his medical renderings. To this day, they've never been bettered. You can actually find medical books where they have his drawings and musculature and things that were done 500 years ago. Because to this day, there haven't been better draftsmen. So yeah, he was really a genius. And again, this kind of showcases his love of equine and animals. And
so going back to this piece over here, can you tell us, this guy calls you up and says, I have a Leonardo da Vinci. And why did he call you in particular? Was he in Vegas? Did he just see you on TV?
Well, a lot of it does come from the television show. A lot of people, they recognize Art Encounter and recognize me, which I appreciate, as kind of somebody they can trust or feel like they can trust. And I get a lot of calls, obviously not on Leonardo da Vinci, but a lot of times people will say, I have a piece, I think it's something, but I didn't know where to turn, and I saw you on the show and you seem to know what you're talking about. Can you help me with it? And like I say, the Leonardo, when he called up, as you might expect, 9 times out of 10 when people call and think they have something, They really don't, unfortunately. A lot of times they'll think they have a Monet or a Renoir, but it's a print or it's a painting that was done after. But every once in a while, as with the Leonardo, when people call, they do have what they think that they have. And so we've learned, like I say, we've learned a long time ago not to hang up or ever discount what people say, because sometimes there is that diamond in the rough.
So show us how you authenticated this.
Well, see, I'm not an expert in Leonardo.
Okay.
I mean, I kind of have a wide breadth of knowledge in a lot of different arts and effects and things like that. So a lot of times I can get a feeling or know from my own connoisseurship if something could be. And then from there, what Art Encounter does is put the piece in front of the right people.
Okay.
We take it to experts. We get opinions. We bring in people to give their opinions on works. We do the research. We trace the provenance. I mean, in this piece, you've got over 500 years of history, 500 years of archival information, 500 years of just accounting for it through different scholarly texts. So a lot of that needed to be traced because a lot of that had been lost to time. So even today, we're still unearthing articles that were written, 50, 100 years ago on the piece. And we have to do that with a lot of our art, everything from, Leonardo through to Picasso, through to the Edward Hopper that I mentioned. It's all about, tracing that. So, and the further you get up the food chain, and when it comes to art, you don't get any higher than Leonardo. The smaller the tip of the pyramid as to the experts that are qualified to weigh in. Carlo Pedretti, the gentleman who was allowed by the Queen of England herself to go in to catalog the pieces in her collection, he was one of the few authorities that really carried a lot of weight. So when he gave his opinion and said he believed the piece to be from the hand of Leonardo,
wow,
that was definitely a high five, hooray moment.
So for authenticating work, it's really just about building a case that convinces enough people to say, yes, this is what it is.
Exactly. And unfortunately, we've had people that have presented their works without enough information, works that ultimately prove to be authentic, but unfortunately you only get one chance.
Oh.
So if you present it to, let's say, the board of trustees or the estate or a committee that was formed that authenticates a particular artist's work, and you just say, here it is, a lot of times they'll even if they suspect it might be, they won't put their stamp of approval on it.
Oh, wow.
So again, you really have to have that evidence behind it.
So it's about convincing the board.
A lot. Well, I mean, every artist is different. Sometimes they have a board. Sometimes they have the family. Picasso, it's
So if you ever need to authenticate my work, just say it's not real, because I don't do any art. Just if anyone brings it in and says I have an original Jeff Holst, it's not.
All right. Gotcha. Well, we'll just. I got your phone number.
Just give me a call.
You can get right from the source. That's always the best thing to do. If the artist is living, just call the artist up. But again, with some even 20th century masters like Picasso and Moreau, they've passed. So now you have to defer to their children, their grandchildren in a lot of instances, and it can be political. It can be quite political.
Yeah, but people don't want to authenticate something sometimes because they want to.
Well, if you have the only one of something, you might not want to authenticate a similar piece, right?
Well, and sometimes we may know that a piece is authentic, but perhaps a board maybe doesn't think that it's, a good representation of that artist's work.
Oh, wow. That is political.
They don't want a lesser piece, maybe, hurting the market or tainting things. Or sometimes in some rare cases, there are some corrupt entities that they'll say, yeah, we'll authenticate it if you give us, a certain amount of the sale price. So
this is why it's very important to have people like you in the corner. Like if I have a piece of art, I should bring it to someone who knows how to go through this process and make sure
you're exactly
that I'm
right.
being treated correctly.
Because having a third party is really important, and having somebody that can represent the work properly, present it properly to these boards, photograph it properly, like I said, get all the I's dotted and T's crossed. So that way they really have no choice but to say yes to the piece.
Yeah.
Then that's what Art Encounter can do. And that's how our business is segued. It's been an interesting ride going from, like we were talking about, from mostly dealing with local and up and coming artists to now authenticating works by Leonardo da Vinci.
That's really amazing. That's really awesome. Okay, so we're here, we're looking at the Picassos now, and we have like a couple of Picassos right here. This is a Miro, but this one's very affordable. You could get this Picasso here for $4,600. This one's a little more pricey, $1.2 million. But I'll tell you,
it's basically the same thing. Really.
Yeah.
It's just money. It's a rounding error.
When my kids were even younger than they are now, they're 12, 9, and 5. We went on a trip up through the state of California, you know,
Sure.
and we
Pacific
decided,
Coast Highway.
yeah, exactly. And we decided to stop in Calistoga. And my sister-in-law and I wanted to stop at a winery, and I found a winery that had a Picasso in it. And since my 9-year-old, it was probably about 6 or 7 at the time, was really into art, I said, let's go to the winery with the Picasso in it. We go all the way to the winery with the Picasso, and I get up to the front, and the woman goes, it's an eclectic Picasso. And I thought that was a really weird thing to say. And then we get to the Picasso, and I have a picture of my 2 little boys underneath a picture of a bunch of dancing naked men. So that's what she meant by eclectic. And this piece is a little...
It's not the worst. It's not the worst.
This is not the worst. No. I'm telling you, the eclectic one and
Jillian's planning on buying this, by the way.
1.2 million. I don't know. This one, there's some weird things going
Like I
on.
said,
This
when
one.
you take checks, we have a layaway program, so we can make
10%
something
down.
happen.
So we did.
Yeah. No, I actually like this one right behind you.
Oh, this is an amazing piece.
Yeah.
Again, this is a Picasso. This is a stone lithograph done by Picasso. Stone lithography, if you're not familiar, it's where each color that you see on here, you see several distinct colors. You see the whites, you see the reds. They're drawn by Picasso in a wax crayon on a stone, typically a limestone. And there's a different stone drawing for each color, and then they're combined. And that's what you get. And it's called hand pulled because Picasso was the one that actually pulled the paper from the stone, hand signed. And
that sounds like a very lengthy process.
It is.
Press the paper into the stone and then multiple times for each color.
For each color. Now this one I believe is only a 2-stone lithograph, but lithographs can be done in,
Sure. So one's for white and one's for pink.
Exactly. And then it's combined. You can see in areas here where the white and the pink are combined, where basically he would draw the white in the same area as the pink, and then they would get interlaid.
Now, is this something that somebody brought into you, or
most of what we have here, we deal with clients that are interested in selling the pieces. Through the show, we have a pretty good reputation. So a lot of people call and say, "I've got a Picasso like the one you see there."
This one's eclectic.
It is eclectic. It's funny you mentioned that story about your children because I have a son, and when he was about 9 years old, I was den leader for his Cub Scout troop. And they were trying to find a good field trip place to take the kids. So I said, well, why don't you come to the gallery? So I came in here before they were scheduled to arrive. I'm like, I got to get rid of some of this art. So this piece and a few others I took back to my office. So that way it would be more PG as opposed to art. Well, anyway, the families came in with their kids and the boys are running around. I'm kind of introducing the pieces to the parents and kind of talking about the gallery. And all of a sudden I noticed none of the kids are around. Like, where are the kids? Well, my son had them in my office showing them the good stuff.
Oh my God.
So they were flipping through all the nudes.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Thanks, son.
Yeah, you're not supposed to admit that on camera.
My son's honorary. What can I say?
No, this is fantastic. So, but the truth is $4,600 for a Picasso is not a lot. I think you just have to find what you like. This is not something I would particularly want to hang in my house.
Right. And Picasso did everything from, again, very eclectic, in nudes and very sexually suggestive. But he also did some incredible, non-representational cubist works, and he was a master at all media. He was a master at figurative works. He was a master at landscapes. He could do it all. His favorite expression, I think, was it took him a year to paint like Rembrandt, but it took him a lifetime to learn how to paint like a child. So, and again, you can see that we've got a pretty eclectic mix of his works.
Yeah, and all these are all different techniques. One's done with the wax and the stone
lithography, right?
And then this is an etching, right?
That is an etching that's done on a copper plate where he actually, inked the plates. He incised the plates, did the acid on the plates, and then pressed it to paper very similarly to the stone lithography. And then this is a one-of-a-kind original. It's a mixed media, crayon and ink wash, and very eclectic.
Is that what makes this one so expensive?
Sure. Yeah. This is a one of a kind. I mean, these were done. For example, this is an edition of 50. So there are 49 other prints just like this one. And his 156 series, it's a series of 156 etchings, all kind of similar themes.
So there's 50 of each of them. So there's
right.
a huge number.
There's a good number when you add them all up. Exactly. That's why, again, art is beholden to supply and demand, just like anything else. So you have a piece that it's a one of. That's going to be more valuable than a piece is one of 50 or a first state lithic.
Like. Can I ask a question about the Moreau? I know we're talking about Picasso, but the Moreau is made in a similar process to the other Picasso. The first one.
This is a stone lithograph too, exactly. And you can see the different colors, and each color is drawn separately by Moreau and then combined at the end of the process.
And this is also a series where they would do multiples of the same one.
An addition of 150.
So they use the same rocks, the stones?
Basically, yes, exactly. And it's the same thing with the etching. They use the same plate. There is some desirability among some collectors to get a lower number. Just simply, even though, again, with an addition of 50, you're not going to notice a difference between the first one and the 50th. But sometimes over time, the plate will wear out. The grooves will kind of become less defined. The ink might not be as laid evenly. So sometimes you'll notice a difference between the first etching off of an etching plate and the last one.
And so some etchings are done multiple series too, right? There might be 50 in the first impression, right?
Right, sure.
And then there may be a second or a third
They'll
impression.
have like different states where sometimes the artist will maybe do a run and say, I think I want to add a tree here. And they'll add a tree, and then that'll be the second state of an etching. And then they also have sometimes, now, these are all original graphics. And when I say that, I mean they were done by the artist in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'll hear the term like a restrike etching.
Sure.
Those are ones that are basically done from the original plate, not by the original artist, where the plate is kind of repaired to a degree where they'll re-incise the lines and retouch things and spruce it up for another edition after the artist.
Which is the way that I think sometimes people can get some masterworks, right?
Sure.
You see like Rembrandt etchings that are done many, many years after his death.
Park West, the company that auctions them, I think they actually purchased the plates, the original plates. So yes, they're the original plates that were done by Rembrandt and then later restruck and kind of repaired and then reissued. Not hand pulled by Rembrandt, but from his plates that he originally incised way back when.
Sure.
That's awesome. Okay, so now we're over to one of my favorite artists, Salvador Dali. I love Dalis. I think they are, they tell such great stories. You can find something for everybody in a Dali. And this one right here particularly caught my eye. It's Symphony Bicyclettes.
That's right. It's a bicycle symphony.
Okay.
And that's the nice thing about Dali is, there's so much subtext in his work.
Yeah.
So knowing the story behind it, what he was thinking, because Dali was very surreal, both in terms of his art and his thought process.
Right.
But a lot of people don't know on this one, he's actually a very close friends with the Marx brothers, Harpo and Groucho. And this particular one, this was actually done as a tribute to Harpo Marx. So this is a bit of a homage to the Marx brothers. What he had done was he had sent Harpo an actual harp, ironic. And Harpo had sent him a picture back of him playing the harp that had been strung with barbed wire, very, very surreal, that Dali had done, where Harpo had bandages all on his fingers. So they used to do that quite a bit. They would exchange goofy gifts and, reciprocate in kind. And
so I got to get a picture of that picture to go next to my painting.
Right, exactly. I wonder if you can find that online. I bet you can. You can find just about anything online nowadays. So,
oh, wow.
This is Bicycle Symphony. We also have a number of works from from the Divine Comedy. Dante's Inferno.
I own one of these, actually.
I saw the picture. Yeah. So these are actually woodblock prints, which is a very esteemed way of reproducing. Again, there's so many different ways of reproducing art. And we talked a little bit about stone lithography. We talked a little bit about etchings. But woodblock prints are in a way like etchings, but done with wood, where they would inside, do like almost like a wood stamp, rubber stamp,
right?
But they'll do it in wood. Very much pioneered, in Asian art, dating back thousands of years, and it gives it a real, almost kind of a watercolor feel. You look at these; they almost look like watercolors.
They do
because of the stamp-like nature of it, the way the inks kind of pour into the grooves and spread in the paper. Gives it a real original look.
And this is also something, by the way, that I feel like our audience could legitimately
Totally.
afford.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, these are $3,000.
And these are hand signed. In some editions, they're numbered, in some they're not. Again, you can get a signed Divine Comedy print for oftentimes as little as $2,000.
Wow.
And that's from a wood block that was done, hand done by Dali himself.
Now, and this one right here is very Dali. Like this looks very Dali-esque.
Right, with the melting
Yeah.
and everything. Everybody knows the melting clock. And again, that's quintessential Dali. I mean, there's certain images, he did a lot of the melting timepieces, ants, horses and things like that are kind of recognized as Dalinian, and this one is very
Dalinian. We got to remember that. We learned a new word.
But again, you could get something that looks like Salvador Dali did it, and it's $3,000.
Sure.
I mean, that's
just wrap it up. I'm taking.
Now the one thing.
Are you really?
Probably.
Well, we can do that for you. Add to your wall of fame.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the one thing you do have to be careful with Salvador Dali, and Scott and I are always having to vet and authenticate his works because there was a lot of impropriety with his pieces, and that's part of why some of the graphics are affordable.
Mhm.
Typically, a work like this, a woodcut hand done by Salvador Dali, signed and designated an artist proof, would be at least $10,000 plus. But because of all the impropriety in the marketplace dating back from the late 70s through the 80s, there's still a little bit of there's some fraudulent works that are out there, and it's kind of disturbed the market to the benefit of the savvy collector and to the benefit of people like us, like Art Encounter, because we can put out works that we've vetted, that we've authenticated, that we know are accurate, and present them to clients at a reasonable price.
This is a great reason for people to come to a place like this, because there are galleries all over Vegas and all over the world, actually, that maybe have a little less incentive to tell the truth.
That's right. And I always get nervous when people say, "Oh, I got this, on a cruise, or I got this on eBay."
Oh, cruise.
This, just because, not so much because
you just don't know, right?
It's
eBay is really
but you don't know.
Right?
You really don't know. And a lot of times it's not the people selling it that are at fault. They don't know, because a lot of the impropriety went right up to Dali's, right-hand men and women. Some of his signature galleries were selling some disreputable works. So again, separating the wheat from the chaff is what Art Encounter does well.
Can we go find stuff out of Salvation Army maybe and bring stuff?
Sure. Well, that's why I wrote that book, the Pocket Picker for Fine Art, so people could take it to estate sales, to auctions, and they can kind of look and say, "Hey, this is a stone lithograph, and here's how I."
Yeah, I'm gonna buy that book for a couple of people I know who like to go
cool
picking.
It's fun. We, through the Pawnstars, I meet a lot of people that they do that, and I've noticed people were kind of making some of the same mistakes over and over again. So I wanted to put it in a book form to where people could take it as a manual when they went on site.
That is so fantastic. All right, we're not going to take up much more of your time, I promise.
Sure.
But there's one last story I want you to tell us.
Of course.
It's over on this wall over here, because we have a group of paintings behind us or in front of us rather, that are all look like they're telling some kind of stories, and I'd like to ask you about
of course.
that, if you
Mark
don't mind.
Chagall, of
Yeah.
course.
All right, so here we have a wall of Chagall's.
Chagall wall.
Very colorful, but this one here really is interesting because it's less colorful than what we typically see.
Right, and this is an etching. So again, typically etchings, unless they're aqua tints or hand colored, they're going to be basically black and white. So it is an etching, as we discussed, where Chagall himself actually added the acids and the inks to the plates and pushed it to paper. This is basically from Fables de La Fontaine, which is a suite of fables, very much like Aesop's fables.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one, it's called The Frogs Asking for a King. Basically, the story behind it is the frogs asked Zeus for a king, and Zeus brought them a dog. And apparently the dog didn't do anything, just sat around. So the frogs complained to Zeus and said, "Hey, bring us something more worthwhile." So Zeus brought a crane, and the crane proceeded to eat all the frogs. So the moral of the story is basically be careful what you wish for.
Well, there you go. I'm not going to wish for this artist to do anything for me then.
But again, another relatively affordable piece with a great story behind it.
And hand signed, it looks like by the artist.
And it's a hand signed. It's an HC, which is a designation, which means orders de commerce, which is basically a French designation, meaning not for sale. So this was likely a proof, possibly given to the artist, and the artist subsequently gave it out or was used by the studio maybe as a presentation piece, but it's in exceptional condition. With prints, the analogy I always use is they're kind of like baseball cards. You know, if they're in mint condition, they're worth a certain amount. But as soon as you start getting acid burns or creases or things, you lose a lot of value. This is in an amazing condition. The paper is still very much the tone and the color as it should be. There's no foxing or acid staining, which a lot of times you get from old-time frames because they're non-conservational. You can clearly see the plate mark in the paper where it was pressed to paper. See that kind of embossed line in there. So everything that you want to look for in a print is there. And with Marc Chagall, you don't get much better. Picasso, Chagall,
and
all
only
master printers.
$5,000.
Exactly. And that's, again, we work with clients from all over the world. And we're able to kind of, pick the best and vet them. Make sure they're authentic and present them to our clients for a good price.
Yeah. And by the way, this is why we wanted to talk to you. I don't know you know much about our show. I'm sure you're a huge fan. I've been watching it for years.
You've been a client for years.
Yeah,
so we.
Yeah, so you keep up on me. I appreciate that. But so what I wanted to bring you to talk to you about was that to let people know that they actually can collect master works of art. Mm-hmm. A Chagall for $5,000 or a Picasso for $5,000.
And it doesn't even have to be $5,000. I mean, the piece that I have a piece in my home. It's basically a poster of Kandinsky, the artist, the very surreal kind of line drawn. It looks a little like Modigliani. And I love that. I look at every time I go past it, I stop and I look at it. And it was a $20 poster. So it doesn't matter if it's a $20 poster or a $20 million masterpiece. If it's something that you relate to, that brings joy to your life, then it was a good investment. So a lot of our clients started out with the posters and have over time graduated more towards the etchings and the stone lithographs, and then hopefully, down the road, maybe an original might be in the cards.
Sure. Well, one of the first things I bought from your gallery was framed cigarette box tops.
Oh yeah,
and they're really cool. I love them.
Those are stone lithographs too. Yeah, and it's amazing the process.
And they were very affordable. Those were a few $100s.
Right. Oh yeah, and they're very artistic. And the thing I like about those is I know you do too, Jeff, is the history behind them. Some of the imagery and things like that. Yeah. Turn of the century iconography.
Well, I put it in my library. One has Mark Twain on it.
Oh yeah.
I put it up in the library.
They're perfect for the main picture for sure.
Well, I don't want to take any more of your time. I could ask questions.
You have lots of questions?
I have lots of questions, but I'm going to stop because we've taken up all of your time today, and we thank you so much.
I'm glad I was able to do it. I was able to do it in person because this art, on a Vimeo is not the same.
So, not at all.
So thank you so much for doing it. We really appreciate it. Jillian, do you want to take us out?
Everybody, thank you so much for joining us on this very special episode of the Last Life Ever podcast. I'm Jillian Sidoti. This is Jeffrey Holst.
Yes, I am.
And he's going to remind you that
to live the very best version of your last life ever. Jillian, how was that for you?
It was good. I liked it.
Check this out.
Oh, look at that.
See, we were just talking about that on that show. I mean, I got a little bit of a glare here, so sorry about that.
No, that's very nice.
That's my certificate of authenticity on the back, too. See?
Nice. I love it.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Cigar.
Art of the cigar, yeah. So stone lithography on a cigar box top that was framed. And I got to actually, what I didn't tell Brett on there was I was walking around Caesar's Palace one day and I put a $20 bill in a video poker machine and won $600. And so I was like, I probably could just gamble this money away or I could buy some art. So I went over there and bought those. I bought 2 cigar box tops with money.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I had a nice dinner too because it was only they were $150 plus tax or something. So I only spent $350 or whatever on it.
That works.
Yeah. So it worked out pretty well. Probably had a couple of drinks, maybe an old fashioned or 2.
Oh, just 1 or 2.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was actually pre-old fashioned days, if you can imagine. I was actually
those days existed. I thought you came out of the womb drinking old fashions.
No. I actually weirdly never had an old fashioned until I met Brian.
For those of you that don't know, Brian Leverage is Jeff's partner in his other podcast, not as good as this podcast, the Old Fashioned Real Estate Podcast. But still very good, and you should go check it out.
Yeah, it's an amazing show. It's probably the second best podcast of all time. Right after Last Life Ever. I probably would say the same thing on reverse though on that other show, just to be clear. They're just so good. It's hard to split hairs.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Go check out at Art Encounter. If you're in Vegas, go check them out in person. And Jeff, what do we want to remind everybody to do?
To live the best version of their
last life ever.